For decades, the world was told one version of Admiral Byrd's expedition to Antarctica. But now, after more than 70 years, the last surviving witness has spoken. What he revealed is not in any history book, and it may change how we see the frozen continent forever. This is the story the US military tried to bury until now. I've been researching this story for months, and honestly, what I found kept me up at night. So here's the thing. Back in 1947, Admiral Richard Byrd was already a legend. This guy had flown over both the North and South Poles. He was a national hero, okay? But what happened during Operation Highjump in Antarctica, that was something completely different. Now, most people have heard bits and pieces about Byrd's expeditions, but what they do and know is that there was a press conference in South America in 1947 that changed everything. Byrd, this decorated naval officer, made a statement that newspapers actually published at the time. He warned that the United States could face an enemy that can fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Think about that for a second. We're talking about 1947, before jets were even common. What enemy could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds? The official military brushed it off, newspapers buried the story, and for decades, that was it. But Robert Johnson remembered every word. Robert Johnson was 23 years old when he served as a crew member on Operation Highjump. For 72 years, he kept his mouth shut about what really happened down there. But at age 95, with most of his fellow servicemen gone, he finally decided to talk. Johnson passed away in 2019 at age 99. But not before he sat down with researchers and told them things that were never ever written in any official military record. And believe me, what he remembered will give you chills. He described how Admiral Byrd returned from a solo reconnaissance flight looking, and I quote, shaken to his core. Johnson was there when Byrd's plane landed, and he said the Admiral's face was pale, almost gray. But here's the weird part. Byrd refused to log his flight path in the official records. A decorated naval officer, breaking protocol, that's unheard of. But Johnson remembered something else. As Byrd walked past him that day, the Admiral quietly said, "You were there. You know what we saw? Never forget it." Johnson carried those words for nearly 8 decades. Alright, so here's where things get really strange. Johnson described how certain areas of the expedition were suddenly declared off-limits. No explanation, just don't go there. We're talking about military personnel who had clearance to be in Antarctica in the first place. He recalled finding what he described as a massive fissure in the ice, like a crack that went deeper than their equipment could measure. But what really stuck with him was the sound. Johnson said there was this low humming vibration coming from deep within the ice. Not wind, not machinery, something else entirely. Now get this. Johnson also mentioned that several crew members were sent into what appeared to be natural tunnels in the ice. Some of these men, according to Johnson, never came back. When he asked his superior officers about the missing personnel, he was told they had been reassigned to other duties. But Johnson never saw them again, and their names, he claimed, were later erased from the official crew manifest. You know what's crazy? None of this appears in any declassified military documents. It's like it never happened, except Johnson remembered it all. Now here's where things get really controversial. Years after the expedition, a diary surfaced that was supposedly written by Admiral Byrd himself during his solo flight. Most historians doubt it's authentic, and honestly, I can see why. The content is, well, it's extraordinary. According to this disputed diary, Byrd described flying over a warm valley in the middle of Antarctica. We're talking about rivers, forests, and temperatures that should be impossible at the South Pole. The diary goes on to describe mammoth-like creatures roaming this hidden land, and even more incredible, a crystal city with advanced flying craft. But here's the part that really grabbed headlines. The diary claims Byrd met beings who called themselves the Master, and they warned him about humanity's use of atomic weapons after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now look, I'm not saying this diary is real. Most experts think it's fiction, but what's interesting is that it appeared decades after Johnson started talking about restricted zones and missing personnel. Coincidence? Maybe. But it's worth noting. Here's what we know for certain. Operation Highjump was originally planned to last 6 to 8 months. It was a massive operation, 4,700 personnel, 13 ships, and 33 aircraft. This was the largest Antarctic expedition in history at that point. But here's the thing. After just 8 weeks, the entire operation was suddenly terminated. The official reason? Bad weather and logistical problems? But Johnson remembered it differently. He claimed that reports started disappearing. Photographs of unusual ice formations and structures were classified and locked away, and communication with the outside world became heavily restricted. Johnson said he personally saw aerial photographs of geometric shapes in the ice that didn't look natural. But when he asked about them later, he was told those photos never existed. The speed of the withdrawal was unprecedented. We're talking about leaving behind expensive equipment, cutting short scientific research, and bringing home 4,700 people with barely any explanation. That's not how military operations work, especially ones that cost millions of dollars. After the expedition returned, something interesting happened. Admiral Byrd was essentially silenced. No more press conferences, no more public statements about Antarctica. Johnson claimed that all expedition members were required to sign additional non-disclosure agreements beyond their standard military oaths. But here's what really bothered Johnson in his later years. He said that when he tried to reconnect with fellow expedition members decades later, many of them claimed they had no memory of the unusual events he described. Some even denied being part of certain operations that Johnson clearly remembered them participating in. Now, was this just old men with fading memories? Possibly. But Johnson's recollections were remarkably detailed and consistent every time he told them. He remembered names, dates, specific conversations, even the weather conditions on particular days. In 1959, just 12 years after Operation Highjump, something unprecedented happened. The Antarctic Treaty was signed by 12 nations, effectively making Antarctica off-limits to military activities and keeping most of the continent restricted for scientific research only. Now, on the surface, this seems reasonable. Preserve Antarctica for science, prevent military conflicts, protect the environment. But Johnson always found the timing suspicious. Why the sudden international agreement to keep people out of Antarctica? What were they protecting, or what were they hiding? The treaty has been updated several times, but the core restrictions remain. Even today, you can't just go to Antarctica. Every expedition is monitored, every research station is registered, and vast areas remain completely off-limits to civilians. Johnson used to say, if there's nothing down there but ice and penguins, why do they guard it like Fort Knox? In his final interviews before his death in 2019, Robert Johnson was asked directly, what do you think Admiral Byrd really saw during that solo flight? Johnson paused for a long time, then said, I think he saw something that challenged everything we thought we knew about our world. Whether it was natural phenomena we couldn't explain, or something else entirely, I don't know. But I know it scared a decorated war hero so badly that he never spoke about it publicly again. Johnson also revealed something he'd never mentioned before. He said that in the months after returning from Antarctica, several expedition members died in what were reported as accidents or suicides. The rate was unusually high for a group of young, healthy military personnel. Johnson always wondered if there was a connection. His final words on the subject were haunting. The truth is still down there, buried under miles of ice and decades of silence. Maybe it should stay buried. Maybe we weren't meant to know. So what's the truth about Admiral Byrd's expedition to Antarctica? Well, here's what we know for certain. Byrd did make that statement about an enemy that can fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. That's documented historical fact. Operation Highjump was cut short after just 8 weeks, despite being planned for months. That's also fact. And the Antarctic Treaty of 1959 did place unprecedented restrictions on one of the world's largest continents. Robert Johnson's testimony adds layers to the story that official records don't contain. Whether you believe his account of restricted zones, missing personnel, and strange phenomena, or you think it was the imagination of an old man, one thing is undeniable. Something happened in Antarctica in 1947 that was significant enough to influence American policy for decades. The question that keeps me up at night is this. If it was just a routine expedition that ended early due to bad weather, why all the secrecy? Why the non-disclosure agreements? Why the immediate international treaty to restrict access? Maybe Johnson was right. Maybe the truth is still down there, waiting under miles of ancient ice. Maybe, just maybe, we're not ready for what Admiral Byrd really discovered in the frozen wilderness at the bottom of the world. What do you think happened during Operation Highjump? Was Robert Johnson telling the truth, or was he just an old man with a vivid imagination? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that challenge the official narrative. Until next time, keep questioning what you're told, because sometimes the most incredible stories are the ones they try hardest to bury.